You are now listening to Ride With Me, the Fraternity Podcast.
Welcome to Ride With Me, episode 68. Today is September 11th, 2021. Damn, September 11. Another freaking year gone by. Today's guest is my buddy, Chris.
How's it going?
My buddy Chris here. You know what? Let me specify. My buddy Chris Ocampo, because I have a lot of you fuckers as friends. I realized that last episode I'm recording, I have a brother Chris, I have this Chris, I have that Chris, I have you Chris. Yes, Chris Ocampo. I've known this. I'm going to call you kid, bro, because to me, you're still a kid. You haven't hit 30 yet. You're still a kid. I've known this kid since before he was even born. His mom is a friend of the family. I consider her a second mom to me / older sister. She's been with me when I was going through hell, and it's sad to say when my mom gave her an ultimatum, well, you pick Andy's friendship or mine, his mom chose mine. And I will always love her for that, you know, because she witnessed how I was brought up. And I'll always love your mom for that, bro. You know, and you're like a little brother, man. We've known you, like I said, I've known your mom since before you were born, and it's wonderful to see how great of a young man you've become. And don't get soft on me, all right? Don't start crying, mister. You can kick my ass with one pinky, so don't get soft on me, all right? It's just you know, growing up, you've always been kind to myself. You've always been kind to my siblings. You've always been kind to my kids. You know, my kids, we would go visit you and visit your mom and yourself, and you would just take my kids to the park, and which was down the street in Santa Paula. But I've always admired you, man. You've always had a good head on your shoulder, buddy. Regardless of living in the ghetto, and you know, we all know what it's like living in the ghetto. And you, my friend, I have nothing but wonderful things to say about you, man. I was on live on TikTok the other day, and I don't know why you came up, or I don't know why the military came up, and I pulled your military photo, and I was showing the people that were watching, and I'm like, this guy right here, this guy can do no wrong. And people gave you props. They're like, hey, thank you for your service. And so from my friends on TikTok, they said, thank you for your service, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. Everyone that talked to you back home that is older than I am always says, you know, that they still think of me as a young man, as a kid. And it's funny because when I've got, you know, brand new soldiers coming in, one of them actually, for a long time kept referring to me as dad, which was really funny and kind of weird in a sense. But, you know, I kind of get the mentality of it, right? These kids that come in, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, most have never been really given much structure. And when they get into the unit, especially in my unit, that's the first thing that we establish is that structure with them, kind of making sure that they understand, you know, what right and wrong is, understand how to be successful when it comes to our unit and what they do.
You know what, buddy? I've tripped out that you picked to go to the Army because you've always been a quiet kid. Always. You've always been quiet. You've spoke your mind. You know, you always told us whatever it is you need to tell us, whatever was on your mind or whatever the case would be, but you've always been quiet. So for you to see you now in the Army, and then you pretty much telling other people what to do, dude, even your arm is tripping me out right now. This freaking tattoo, what the hell is this? Look at that. Is that a whole sleeve? Look at this guy. Yeah, man, you've always seemed to us, you always seemed like the shy, quiet kid. And when you came, I love you for taking your time out when we went to visit my grandma and for you to come and visiting for a bit. And that story you told us about that individual that wasn't listening, for you to tell us that you raised your voice, I call BS. But look at you. Like I said, man, you. I would have never assumed you to pick this profession, but hey, what do they say? The quiet ones are the scary ones, or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, back to the childhood. I mean, our childhood. Your mom always took us camping. We always went, and I think that was a yearly thing, right? We made that a yearly thing,
Yeah.
and we would pick either Lake Casitas or Steckel Park, and I it sucked because once you guys grew up and you took off, and your brother Mikey took off, your mom's like, well, this is our last camping trip, and she gave me a lot of her stuff that's still sitting there that came in handy the last time I went camping. We went camping in 19, and we went during the week. We've never gone during the week, right? And we ended up going during the week, and the park was empty. We were the only ones. We were at Lake Casitas, the spots that are next to the showers in the bathrooms.
Yeah.
There's only one there's only one set of showers in that place, and we camped. We took our spot. We picked that spot by the restrooms. Dude, we were the only ones there. My buddy Roger was so freaked out he slept in his car. My kid, it was his first time camping, so my kids were like, they were kind of mad. They're like, Dad, we built him this tent for him to sleep in his car. What the fuck, But yeah, man, your mom, will always have good memories of you guys when we would go camping, and that was, like I said, it was a tradition every year, and we have to take time one day and hopefully all this COVID bullshit ends soon, so we can go do that again, man.
Yeah, definitely.
So you decided to first of all, dude, we went to your graduation, and man, they called your name 20, 30 times, bro.
Something like that, yeah.
They called you for almost every award that they can make at a high school.
Yeah, it's funny about that. I was actually talking to one of my friends yesterday that's in the unit. We were talking about a bunch of different stuff. But one of the things that I was talking about, because they had told me, they're like, you have this really great memory. Like you hear something once, or you do something once, it's locked in your brain. I was like, well, I just wish that worked when I was in school. Because the high school that I graduated from wasn't the high school that I started at. It was actually a continuation school for kids that got kicked out or failed out of traditional high school. So it's kind of one of those places where they got the trailer park classrooms, and they give you a packet to work on throughout the week. You really just finish it in a day, turn it in, get your next packet. It actually wasn't until about a week before graduation, my principal had come to me and asked me, she's like, so why did you come over to this high school? And she's like, well, let me re-clarify my question, because I didn't know why you're here. It's because you failed out of traditional high school. But what I don't understand is how we got to this point. And so kind of asked her, I'm not really sure what you mean. And she said, well, throughout your records, it shows that you are identified as what was called a gateway student. It was then when it kind of clicked. Throughout my school, it wasn't that I struggled in school, it's that I hated doing it. I felt that it was repetitive. And one of the kind of things that pointed that out was when I was in, I think I was in middle school. I was enrolled in two different math classes. The first one was the traditional math class that everyone had to take. The other one was the advanced math class. And in the traditional class, I think I was getting like a D or an F. And in the advanced math class, I got an A plus with turning in all assignments, getting 100% on all the exams. And that was only because in that class, I felt that it was challenging enough where it wasn't repetitive. I actually had to work to do something.
So you like the challenge?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Jojo's in Gate too, and he kind of hates it sometimes because it's like, I don't want to be this smart. I went to a different school to, I'm now in a different class. Instead of having fun, I'm doing more work, and but it pays off, man. It's like, because of 2020 and him being homeschooled, his grade actually started dropping, and his teacher, because it's the same teacher she had him in 5th grade. She told us, she's like, I'm not going to penalize him because I know that he has a gift. I know that he's super smart, and distance learning is not cutting out for him. So I can't really, kind of punish him for that. I'm like, well, then don't give him a
Mhm.
fucking C, man. Give him if you know what he's capable of doing, don't give him a 76, man. So
Yeah.
we got on him, and he ended up raising that grade again. So I'm like, dude, you're going to lose your electronics if you don't raise that grade again. And right now he has, for being his first couple weeks of junior high, he's got a couple A's and one B, and it's only a B because he failed a history test. So I'm hoping that he doesn't have what I had, and dates and numbers and stuff don't stick. I'm hoping he can catch on quick. And I think he said he got like 13 out of something. I'm like, dude, that's a D. So
Mhm.
I mean, hopefully he'll. I mean, it's first couple weeks of junior high. I'm sure he'll master it. I'm sure he'll
Yeah.
master it. But again, you got up there multiple times, man, multiple awards, and then right after that, you took off to the army, right? The army, right?
Yes.
So what made you pick the army?
Um, well, as far as the Army goes, it's kind of a funny story. It actually wasn't even a thought of ever doing that. Um, the way that kind of went is three of my buddies, we had gone to take what's called the ASVAB, which is basically a test that you take to see whether or not you're even at the bare minimum qualified educationally to go into the military. So the funny part is it was announced, to all of the juniors and seniors of the high school that, hey, there's going to be this 4-hour block. You get to take this test. And what we understood is you take the 4-hour test and then you go home. So that was the only reason why we took it, was like, hey, we can ditch class, go to this thing, bullshit it for 4 hours, and then go home. And at the end of it, they're like, all right, go back to your class. And we're like, what the fuck? We thought we were going to go home. And from there, the kind of silver lining in that was, after everyone completed the test, and one of the recruiters talking to us about, college education and what the military can pay for. And at that time, I knew college was something that I was interested in, but didn't know, one, how to pay for it, and two, whether or not I was qualified based on my previous grades. Um, so looking at that, they kind of were able to convince me enough to go back to the recruiting station to talk about specifically college and what can be offered. Um, and so it was about a week after that is when I had made an appointment to go and see the recruiter. And I went over there. I think I either got on a bus or I had someone drive me there. I don't remember. But went over there, spent about an hour and a half with the recruiter talking to them, with the sole purpose of the conversation be about education and how I would be able to afford that if I went into the military. And the Army was just the only branch that was there during the class. So that's a majority of where I got my information from. And then looking at other branches, the Army is the only one that offered me and everyone an opportunity to actually choose your job. If it was open and you qualified for it, you were able to reserve your position so long as you met all the previous requirements. So that's kind of the main reason why I went for the Army.
All because you try to ditch class.
Yep.
That's all I got out of your conversation. No, I'm playing. No, I mean, but again, look at you, man. You can freaking snap my neck with the pinky. You know, I'm glad that I'm on your side. You know, because I'm telling you, man, this little boy is, you know, all grown up and can probably kick half LAPD's ass. I only said that because I have an LAPD family member. But how was the did you regret after it when you were in training or boot camp as a boot camp?
Yeah, so we call it just basic training for the Army, but there was I think we kind of joke about it now. Everyone that has been in the military for a while is that there's always that point in basic training where you kind of look around and you're like, I fucked up. But for some, it lasts for a while. For me, it was kind of like it came and it went. I still say to this day, basic training was the most fun that I've ever had because I was challenged in so many ways, physically, mentally. And once you get over the fact that, you've got all these people screaming at you and telling you to do these ridiculous things, tasks that you're never going to accomplish in the time that they give you, once you kind of realize that that's the intent, you kind of start having fun with it because you realize that the whole intent is to work together. It doesn't matter, the timeline that you have, the equipment that you have. The intent is to have everyone come together as a team, and which is what I try to do with my guys in my unit. I'll give them certain tasks. Usually we'll give them enough time to complete it, but it's very stretched, just so that way they get to learn each other and learn how each other think. But basic training specifically, that's what it's designed to do, is to get everyone to work as a team.
Oh, okay. I can think of that one time where in Captain America where they told him, hey, whoever can bring the flag down gets a ride back. Mm-hmm. And he takes the pin off and then boom. Is that what you're talking about? One of those tasks?
Yeah, things like that. Yeah. One time when we were in basic, they had to set up this communication tent. And what they did to mess with us is they held on to all the bolts that were required to hold everything together. So for a good 30 minutes, we're sitting out there, trying to put this thing up. And then we realize, hey, there's all these little sockets that need to be put in place to hold this thing together. And so we were told, we'll figure it out. So we went around and we eventually found sticks that were thick enough to fit in there. And of course, it didn't end up holding up. But the fact that we were able to think collectively outside the box to accomplish the mission was the whole goal of the exercise.
Gotcha. Again, you came to visit us when we were visiting my grandma in El Paso. You were just 20 minutes away. You clocked out from work, and then you came to see us. And what sticks of that conversation was when you asked me how my podcast was going. And before I can answer, my wife said that she's noticed a difference in my attitude ever since. And you responded with the fact that if I hold things in and hold it in and hold it in and hold it in, I will explode eventually. And that's who I was in the past. And it's a trip because the other day, the way my wife said okay, and it's the way I took it as she's only saying it in the way of shutting me up, like okay, and I kind of snapped, but I kind of like, I didn't rip her a new one, but I kind of like said my piece in an angry way. And then like maybe an hour later, I don't know what she asked me, and I'm like, I mean, I don't want to bring the Hulk back, So she said, if that was the Hulk, if what I just saw an hour ago was the Hulk, then that means you're doing a lot better, because that was nothing. If that was your version of a 10, then it's a lot better than what you used to be. So, and the reason why you said that was because you're a military, is it military or army therapist?
Yeah, so my I hold a bunch of different titles depending on the job that I do. But basically, for the Army, I'm a what's called a behavioral health specialist. What we do is basically we work side by side with uh, counselors, with psychologists, psychiatrists, and we have a bunch of different jobs that we do, but mainly our job is to sit down with individuals, whether they're military, active duty, dependents, veterans. We sit down with them and we have conversations with them and determine what it is that we can do within our services to help them, whether that be with depression, anxiety, PTSD, suicidal thoughts. We have different programs that are out there to help them.
Right. What made you become a therapist?
Um, for the Army specifically, it actually wasn't my first choice. My first choice was actually going into intelligence. And then halfway through the recruitment process, when I went to LA and I went to MAPS, which was the Military Entrance Processing Station, you're then met with additional individuals that are able to look up jobs that are available. And during that conversation, they asked me, they're like, what are your goals? What do you want to do? And I told them my college plan was to go to college and study cognitive psychology, the way people think. And so they said, well, there's this job that just opened up. We've got 12 positions for the entire side of, Southern California. For everyone that comes through, there's only 12 positions open this fiscal year, and it's in behavioral health. I forgot what they called it at that time, but it was something a little bit different. And I asked them, what is it that we're doing? And we kind of explained, you're going to do counseling, you're going to do therapies, you're going to work in a variety of different spaces. So I figured, since it was already kind of something that I was interested in and I was going to go to school for, that it was a natural position to move into and explore more and get a better understanding if that's really the career path that I want to go for. So after that conversation, we had switched career plans, and I started going in processing and started working towards attaining that career field.
How has it been for you so far? Like, I mean, you having a conversation with me about my podcast made me like feel comfortable and like, shit, I want to hire this guy as my therapist. You know? I don't know.
Yeah,
This is where you share whatever it is that you want to share, buddy. I don't want to ask a question that is gonna get you court-martialed or something. This is where the mic is all yours, buddy.
yeah, yeah. So when after I graduated school and I became formally recognized as a mental health provider, I went into inpatient behavioral health, which is what you see outside of the military. This is like your psych wards. Um, but for the military specifically, I have gone to civilian psych facilities and I have seen, what people see in movies, right? People running down the halls naked, people hitting their head on walls and stuff like that. That's kind of the extreme side of psych. But in the military specifically, we don't see a whole lot of that. We see a lot of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and that's where I work in. I work inpatient, and a lot of the service members that come to me are anywhere between 18 and maybe 24, and a lot of them are dealing with depression and anxiety. Um, so when I first came into this career field, I was working as a technician on the unit, providing individual counselings, therapies, initial intake assessment, group therapy conversations. As my time went on, being in the military, man, next month will be 5 years. Um, Being in so long with my career, the more you advance, the more administrative your job becomes. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm the assistant. It's called non-commissioned officer, as far as the rank structure goes, but I'm in charge of the administrative part of the unit, making sure that the unit runs properly, making sure that we've got enough staffing, making sure that we've got everything else we need. In addition to a bunch of other things that are outside of behavioral health that I'm in charge of. But right now, that's my position. I will be leaving this position in the next 30 days. I'll be taking some time off, and then I'll be stationed in Korea, where I'll be the non-commissioned officer in charge of an outpatient clinic, which is similar, like if you were going to see your counselor, your therapist, you're going to their office. That's kind of the same setup that we have in the military.
Oh, okay. And then, so
Mhm.
when are you landing in Korea?
So I'll be in Korea early to mid-November.
And how long you
So
gonna
I'll
be out there
be
for?
so my contract states that I'll be out there for a year, but the way that the military works with contract times, by the time that year ends, I'll only have about 15 months left in my reenlistment contract. I reenlisted last year back in March for an additional 4 years. So by the time that that year ends in Korea, I'll only have about just over a year left. And I imagine with that little amount of time left, they're going to tell me to stay for another year. So I'll probably be out there for 2 years, and then I'll be taking leave from the military for about 4 or 5 months, and then finally be out the door.
So you only have a few more years of this,
Yeah.
and then when are you gonna open an office here on La Puente? I get that family discount, right?
Uh,
No? Okay. Whatever, dude. Just remember, bro, I saw you in diapers, all right? I can give stories of you in diapers, all right?
well, I don't know if I open my practice, the tables might turn. You might be the one being in diapers.
What did I say about this guy being shy and quiet? All of a sudden. So, today being the last day of Suicide Awareness Week, it was from what, the 5th through the 11th, you said?
Yes.
And since I decided to do a solo podcast, I bumped you off. My bad, buddy. Um,
There you
I mean, just give your as much advice that you can give on to people about what to do when it comes to like depression. And I mean, I try to kill myself, but I don't think mine was as bad. I just was going through some shit. Obviously, I don't feel like that anymore. I do get bummed out. Like I was bummed out over a couple weekends ago over a podcast episode that was recorded, and I know that I do have triggers. If you can touch on triggers, those I believe that the moment people can find out what their triggers are, they can understand a lot of shit from their past or whatever it is that, like for example, I didn't know that me running late was a trigger, and it went back to my childhood. And then I didn't know that me eating really fast is like it's a trigger. And there's a lot of, like, they told my wife a long time ago, it's like, dude, you need to have patience with this man because he has a lot of triggers, and running late is one of them. Freaking not wanting to go outside on a weekend is another one. Wanting to stay home is another one. It's just multiple triggers, man. So again, the mic is all yours, man. Whatever advice you want to give, on, like I said, mainly triggers, and then go on from there, buddy. This, like I said, the mic is yours again.
Yeah, with with that, I have a tendency when I'm given the stage to go back and forth between different topics. So if I go off topic, just bring me back. Um,
It's all right, man. I keep my podcast at an hour. You still have 30 minutes, bro.
all right. So one of the first things that I want to bring up was, we had that conversation when you were over here in El Paso, and I gave you the balloon analogy. And right, this is the analogy that I give to a lot of my patients. And what that means is if you've got a balloon in your hand, right, and you're blowing it, the idea of it is that air that's going in are words that come in to you, right? So these are either words that you're giving yourself or things that people are telling you. And the more that you take it, the bigger that balloon gets. So the possible outcomes is one, you reach your capacity and that balloon blows up. And that's where people are used to what's called, the explosion, where you blow up on everyone around you, right?
Yup.
Um, the other way that that's viewed is that's the explosion, but the implosion. So on yourself, and that's where depression can kind of come into play in suicidal thoughts, is all of this stuff that you're holding in now implodes onto yourself. The other thing that comes out is that air's got to go somewhere, right? So if you let that balloon go and it flies across the room, the way that that looks like is you can have controlled venting, when you're talking to someone and you're able to clearly communicate those things that you've been holding in, or you'll see it sometimes where you have coworkers or someone that comes up to you that you're not really that close to, and then all of a sudden you just start rambling on and on and on. And at the end of the conversation, a lot of people have regret, like, damn, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have told this person that. I shouldn't have done this, right? Because they vented out those issues, but it wasn't controlled. Um, and it can be just as damaging as exploding or imploding on yourself. Um, but with Suicide Prevention Week, today being the last day of that week, but for me, I mean, it's every day, right? You have people that have depression, suicidal thoughts every day, sometimes every hour, every minute, and they feel like they don't have hope. With that, another kind of analogy that I teach people is, I don't know how familiar you are with Greek mythology. Are you familiar with Pandora's box?
You are talking to the wrong dude, man. You want me to bring the boys? Because they know all about that. I don't know squat. They're getting me to read that Percy Jackson book, and I said that months ago.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm still on chapter 7, guys. And the boys did an episode 50. It was the boys teach me Percy Jackson. Yeah, I'm still on chapter 7, dude. But if you want me to go bring them, no. But
So,
I have heard that term, yes.
yeah. So Pandora's box. Pandora was sent down. Recalling Greek mythology, Pandora was sent down to Earth to be with Zeus's creation, which was humans. And she was brought down with this box. And Zeus gave her very clear instructions: under no circumstances are you to ever open this box. And of course, curiosity got the better of her. So she decided to open the box. And what came out of this box was just every bad thing that you can think of: diseases, famine, plague, war. All of this bad stuff came out. And so before she had the opportunity to close that box, one final thing came out. And that one final thing was hope. So out of all of this negative stuff that came out, the one good thing that came out of that box was hope. And that's where I use it as a talking point, is that you can have a bunch of negative things happen to you, right? You've got depression, suicidal thoughts, maybe you've had friends or family members that have committed suicide. But the one thing that you tangibly can always think of and have is hope. And as long as you have hope, then you have that chance. Um,
So it's funny you said that, because when I first started this podcast, that was the purpose was, if you feel that your life is shit, walk in my shoes. And
mhm,
and I always said, it was to give people hope that, there is good and you don't have it that bad. But then I started like, this ain't a Star Wars movie. But but now that you said that, it makes me comfortable saying it again. This podcast is to
mhm,
give people hope. And it's funny that, again, that you said that earlier about, letting stuff out. I can say hi to somebody, and just by saying hi to them, they'll start venting. I've had friends. Well, they're friends, but I've had, I consider them friends because I see them on a weekly basis now. I do this I sell beer for a living. I see the same people over and over again on a weekly basis, and I can say, hey, good morning, how you doing? And waterworks, they'll start venting to me. They'll start like, I feel bad, but I recently I had to give one of them guys a hug because he started tearing up, and I'm like, dude, I'm sorry. And with the podcast, with my brother being able to open up a couple weekends ago, people are telling me now, it's like, okay, dude, now you're using your podcast for good. Like, people, because when they asked my brother after he opened up about an event that happened to him, my wife asked him, like, how did it feel to let that out? And he said it felt great, because he's been holding this in for 17 years, and then he finally says it, and he said it felt great. So that balloon analogy that you said, did I say that word right? A balloon analogy
analogy.
it's a perfect example of what at one point I went through, or I'm going through still, because I still to this day, you know, I hold stuff in because I can't talk to the person that I'm supposed to be talking about. If they're doing something that's pissing me off, I feel like I don't have that opportunity to talk to them about what they're doing to piss me off, so that I,
Mhm,
I vent. And that's why last week, instead of recording an episode with you, I ended up recording one by myself and just letting stuff out. And actually it was two takes, because the first one was I said some stuff, and then, like you said, why did I say that? So I went back and completely, same story, but completely just changed the wording like there's no tomorrow. Instead of saying
mhm.
this, I said that, and I went with that. And for the people that know what I mean, they got it. They understand what I'm trying to say. With the people that know me, will know who I'm talking about because of that. But you're right. I said that. I'm like, why the fuck did I say that? And I recorded another episode. I deleted that one and I re-recorded it.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there's a lot of there's a lot of factors that come in with that. Um, One thing that we are talking about, you know, about regret and things that you say. This is something that I teach my soldiers. When they first come in, I tell them, like, I'm not a very strict person. I'm very easy, laid back, but I do have certain rules. And one of those rules is say what you mean and mean what you say. What that comes in is if you're angry or you're upset at something and you come to me with it, whatever comes out of your mouth, make sure that you mean it.
Right.
And with mean what you say is don't come back to me 10, 20 minutes later the next day and say, oh, I didn't mean it that way, or I didn't mean this. No, you meant it. You meant it when you said it, right? So understanding that there's always those consequences to actions, and consequences don't always have to be negative, but being comfortable with what those consequences are. Um, with uh, suicide specifically, since it is Suicide Prevention Week or Suicide Awareness Week, anyone that has ever had thoughts of suicide, the one of the things that I like to tell them is you have to realize that with suicide, you may feel down, You may feel at the lowest point of your life. However, everyone that has had depression, suicidal thoughts, and they're still here today have a 100% success rate, right? Uh, they have found something to hold on to, and that's that hope that has come out of the box.
My kids. I always say, Chris, I always say my kids saved my life.
Hmm.
Because I believe that, like, that day that I was about to jump in front of this train, fuck, I was sorry. Um, I something tugged me back, dude. Something tugged me
Yeah.
back, and it was that was the day that I snapped out of it, and just it's a trip because I told my buddy, my officer Ricky friend here, that whenever I set something, I accomplish it, and 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 that's always been just my goal in life. Is ever since that day, it's like, okay, eliminate this negativity out of your life, and sadly in this case, it was the mother of my kids and my own mother. You saw that.
Hmm.
You know what it was like for me.
Yeah.
The moment I eliminated that circle, then little by little, I started getting my life back. I lost my apartment. I lost my car. I lost my driver's license. I lost everything. Dude, how many times did I sleep in you guys' living room? A couple times, but sadly, you guys were too far for me to stay with you guys, so I had to go back to Oxnard. That's where my kids were. If it wasn't for my
Hmm.
buddy Luis, I wouldn't have somewhere to live. Again, I said he put a freaking bed in his kitchen floor for me to have somewhere to sleep. And
Hmm.
yeah, the hope that you talk about here in my case are my kids. And yeah, I've said it multiple times. My kids saved my life, and even when I lectured Jojo a couple weekends ago, I'm like, kid, you have any idea how much you are my pride and joy? Like, you guys saved my life, and you guys need to. They bicker at each other, they fight at each other, and it's like it gets kind of annoying. So when I hate to, lecture them and spank them, and it hurts me because they are my hope.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. With, depression, specific, because really that's kind of the root of all of this. It can be seen in a bunch of different ways, right? It can be interpreted in different ways, especially now with younger generations, they're more aware of depression and suicide, versus previous generations that was kind of something that was taboo, right? You think about our grandparents, right? That was something that people didn't talk about at the time because it was very taboo. It meant something was wrong with you. Versus now, we realize that it's not always something's wrong with you. Sometimes it's a chemical imbalance in the brain, but many times it has to deal with unresolved issues, right? Um, Depression, when you look at it in teens specifically, because right now teens are more susceptible and more impressionable. So they are more susceptible to depression and anxiety, which ultimately can lead to suicidal thoughts. The way that it's seen in teens is if your teenager out of nowhere, is now very irritable. They don't want to talk to anyone. They don't want to do anything. We tend to play it off like, oh, they're just teens. They're going through their phase of I hate mom, I hate dad. Um,
Nobody knows me. Nobody knows what I'm
yeah,
going through. And what is it? What is it? Nobody understands me.
yeah, yeah. And to an extent, it's a teen's way of finding themselves and getting a better understanding of their perception of what life is. But there's other times where um, it can be some telltale signs of that very clear depression. If they're choosing to stay in the room all day, and they're not doing anything constructive, right? They're not studying, they're not playing video games, and that can be an arguable statement of whether or not that's productive. But they're doing things that are kind of out of character for them, right? And parents, you know your children better than anyone. So you know when they're doing something that's off based on typical behavior. Um, so those are some things that you can look for in kids. In adults. Um, if if you find that you're someone that likes to work really hard, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with succeeding, and there's nothing wrong with, getting everything done. Um, just like I tell when I have leaders that come in, right now, I'm leaving in the next 30 days of my position, so I'm training someone else on how to manage certain things and how to take over for me. One of the things that I teach leaders is look at your high performers. Look at your individuals that are at the top of the list every time. Uh, because more often than not, they're the ones that are going to need the most help mentally. If you find that someone is taking on way more tasks than they should, or if they're underachieving based on previous standards that they had set for themselves, those are some pretty telltale signs that something's not right. Just like with my guys, I know who my top performers are, and I know that I give them enough to keep them busy. But if they start asking for more and more and more and more, then I know that there's something underlying there. There's something that I need to look into, rather than looking at it like, great, they can do all this work for me. Let me give them everything. Understand that sometimes that can be their cry for help without even knowing it.
By overworking.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I never saw it like that.
Yeah. And again, that's why with all leaders, I tell them look at your high performers, look at your top performers, and try to get an understanding of where their balance is with work. Because I tell people you've got your work life and you've got your personal life. You got professional and personal life. Those two should never mix. I have my own rule where it doesn't matter if I got everything done or not, nothing's coming home with me. Everything's staying in the office. And vice versa, no matter what's going on at home, nothing comes to the office.
Can you
Set those.
can
Yeah.
you give me a tip on how to do that? Cause I'll come home stressed as fuck from work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real quick, so the other day I came home, right, and I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't. I used to go to the beach a lot. Obviously, I'm not down the street from the beach anymore. Lately, I've been riding my bike, but when it's 90-degree weather, I don't give a shit what Paul says. I am not riding my bike in 90-degree weather. So I started playing Call of Duty, right, and then Letty, my wife, she's like, after an hour of playing, she says, "Are you cool?" I'm like, "No." No, she goes, "What do you mean? No, you played for like an hour." I'm like, you didn't get the frustrations off?" "No, because I didn't hear that one kid saying, 'Oh man, fuck you, dude.'" So when I hear that 5-year-old saying, "Oh man, fuck you, dude," then I'm satisfied. Then I know. Explain to me why it makes me happy to hear a 5-year-old complain that I killed him in the game.
So, so bullying little kids makes you happy?
Whoa! It's a video game, dude. It's a video game. It's not in real life.
um, yeah. So when it comes to that work-life balance, it's all based on your own interpretation, right? So one of the ways that you can do that is, first, don't bring any physical thing home from work. All right. For some people that do have that, you've got a cell phone, you've got an iPad, you got this technology that you have to have with you. A way that you can separate yourself is have like a staging station, right? So once that laptop, that phone, that iPad goes in that area, it stays in that area until I leave for work the next day or the
Okay.
next week, whenever you return to work. What that does mentally is it tells your brain, I'm shutting this down. I'm leaving this here. I'm not touching it until I mentally have to go back to work. Um, and By doing that, it subconsciously, again, shifts you into going into personal life. And that's when you're with your family, your kids, or if you live alone, doing whatever other activities that you do, whether play video games, watch TV, go exercise, whatever your normal routine is outside of work. So that's a way that you can kind of disconnect from work if you have to carry those things, is you have a staging station. Um, just like for me, I've got my personal phone. Everyone has my phone number. So I'll get calls at midnight, 2, 3, 4 in the morning about work. So for what I do is when I come home, everything goes in a certain area. My keys, um, my keys to my car, my office, everything phone goes into one area and it stays there for a certain amount of time. My phone, once I've kind of relaxed, disconnected from work, then I'll pick up my phone and I'll start doing things, go on Facebook, whatever the case is. But mentally, I know that I don't have to go back to work until I get up at 3 in the morning the next day.
So what you're saying is find a way to charge your phone and your iPad in the car and leave it in the car.
Yeah.
Or come plug it
Either
in
that,
or in
or
the
you can
garage.
hook it up. Yeah, you can hook it up in the garage, or just very simply have it in another room. And some people's excuse of, oh, my phone is my alarm clock. Buy a damn alarm clock. It's like $6.
Yeah.
You don't need your phone.
But what if your phone is your alarm clock? I use my phone as an alarm clock because it vibrates, and it's not the alarm clock because the alarm clock will wake the wife up. And if I wake up the wife, it's not going to be a good day. So I might as well just stay at work. I don't know, man. Your advice is not helping me, dude. I'm playing. I'm playing. But you know what? The entire time you were talking about your phone and stuff like that, I was like thinking, okay, going forward, I'm plugging the iPhone and the iPad in the garage. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah.
Garage. Leave work in garage.
And then that's all, the work-life balance and everything. But going back into signs of depression for an adults, you have hopelessness, right? We just had a conversation about hope and what that means. But hopelessness is the feeling that nothing is ever going to go right. Um, and that's one of those things where it's up for interpretation, right? I can tell you 100 reasons why things are going to go right, but it's up to you whether or not you want to believe them. Um, and that's where that hopelessness comes in. Then you have anhedonia, which is just a fancy word for less interest in doing previous activities. So if you like, for your instance, if you like to go out going out on your bike, if for whatever reason someday you're like, you know what, I don't want to go out on my bike. I'll go tomorrow. I'll go tomorrow. I'll go tomorrow. I'll go tomorrow. Those are some usually telltale signs that something's not right because you're having a break in what's your typical routine, especially when it comes to your personal life. Um, and a lot of people see that and they ignore it. And it's usually seen as, oh, I'm just being lazy or they're being lazy. That's not the case, right? Because laziness is another one of those terms that can be used for interpretation based on how people see things. But anhedonia specifically is loss of interest in things that you previously found pleasure for. And that can be a variety of things. And for whatever reason, you find yourself stop wanting to do those things and not finding replacements for it. That's a sign that either you could have depression, or if you already know you've had previous experiences with depression, it can be a reason that, or it can be a sign that that depression is coming back. Depression is kind of one of those things that there's no real cure for it. I mean, it can be treated both with medications and with holistic things that you can do, but it's never 100% going to be cured. You're never going to really get rid of it 100%.
Dude, you hit another one. It's funny you said that, because ever since El Paso, when my grandma, you know, brought back these memories, or like she brought back these you know, connected stories to what I would dream. I haven't played PlayStation until the other day. I haven't gone on my bike ride till the other day. And I told my wife, here I go. I'm in this funk again. Maybe not depression, because I didn't feel like killing myself, but I was in a funk. And I told her, I'm in a funk again. And up until, you know, a couple of days ago, when I finally turned on the PlayStation, even my brother Chris has been staying with us now. Even he was like, dude, you don't play PlayStation? I'm like, dude, it's not calling my attention. He goes, really? That's weird, because when I first moved in here, you turned it on every day when you got home from work. Before, I would get home, the wife was out and about, and she would, figure something else to do and around the house. But now that she's at work, I take advantage of it. I'm like, shit, she's at work, I'm gonna go play. But since El Paso, and after having those conversations with my grandmother, you're right. I didn't find interest in riding my bike. I didn't find interest in playing games. And damn, dude, you know, you need to open an office here on La Puente, bro. I'm just saying. I'll find some empty buildings for you.
One of the things that I want to touch on that you just mentioned is you said you were in a funk, right? Now, it could still be labeled as depression. Depression doesn't mean that you're always thinking about suicide. Depression doesn't always mean that you want to end your life. Depression is, if you break it down, depressed, right? You feel like there's weight on you. You feel like, just like you said, I'm in a funk, or I'm not in the right headspace. You know, all these things that people like to categorize as, because they want to get away from the word depression. Depression, it's not a negative thing. It's something that happens, and it's a term that's used to categorize a group of feelings, thoughts, ideas, beliefs into one word that kind of makes it easier to identify with. And that's why, again, there's a bunch of different checklists that people have with, do you meet these to be able to be categorized as depressed? But again, that's one of those things where, unless you're going to an actual mental health provider that's going to diagnose you with depression, it's something that's still up to your own interpretation. If you're not ready to do that, look at these signs. Are you falling under these categories? Because you could have some form of depression. Again, doesn't mean that it's bad. It's not always a negative term. It's just a term to identify with a certain feeling.
I gotta. You know what? I want to use excuses of having you on the podcast so I can get free therapy. I just figured it out.
Well, there you go.
There we go. Free therapy.
You can just call me up. You just call me up and say, "Hey, I want to record this podcast," and never hit record, and we're just talking.
Right? Bullshit. I'm hitting record.
With anhedonia, there's decreased concentration and indecision. So if you find that you're one of those people that's really good, left and right, you can make decisions on the spot, and then all of a sudden you're struggling to make a simple decision. You go to McDonald's. I don't know what they have at McDonald's, but you go between these two breakfast sandwiches, and now you don't know what you want. Or at work, you're indecisive about, do I want to take on this project? Do I not want to do this? Versus before, it would be a very easy, yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do that. Indecision can also be an indicator of that, with that decreased concentration. And then, of course, changes in sleep, right? You have people that, I know for me, if I go to sleep 6 hours later, I'm going to wake up. And that's just the way that I'm conditioned. But you have people that, have 8, 9, 10 hours, however many hours you need to get rest. And then all of a sudden you're only sleeping 3 hours, or you're sleeping 15 hours on the weekend. Those are some signs that your body's not fully at rest. And there's a reason to that. It's not because you're physically tired, it's because you're mentally exhausted. And that's another sign of that depression. And you see that in teenagers too a lot. And with teenagers, again, it goes back to that, oh, they're just being lazy. They don't want to get out because they're being lazy. That's not always the case. Sometimes they could be struggling with that depression and don't know how to identify with it. So with depression and going into thoughts of suicide, with thoughts of suicide, people just want to end, in most cases, people want to end the situation. How do you do that? Drugs and alcohol, sleep, and ultimately, for some people, death, right? So the question that I pose to people that are thinking about suicide is, do you actually want to die, or would you rather not be in this situation? In most cases, people are going to say, I don't want to be in this situation. Okay, then how do we change that? What are some things we can do to help get ourselves out of this situation? In many cases, that can be stay away from certain triggers, right? If your family is a trigger for you, where you go into the home and everything's negative, everything's toxic, that's a trigger that maybe you need to stay away from. Doesn't mean that you're never going to be able to be around those people. What that means is you need a break to be able to think about the situation, be able to come up with things for yourself that are going to help you go into that situation without taking anything negative away from it. And those are some of the things that you can do when it comes to triggers. Other signs of depression is change in appetite and unexpected weight gain or weight loss. If you're not if you don't have any plans about gaining weight or losing weight, and then all of a sudden you step on the scale and you realize you just lost 10 pounds, but you're not exercising, you're not dieting, you're not doing anything, you start to realize, well, over the last week I've only had one meal a day, or I've only had one meal every couple of days. And that's where I bring it back to my overworkers. My overworkers, they tend to stop eating and they tend to forget to eat because they're so focused on, I need to get this done, I need to get this done, I need to get this done. Why? Because if I don't get it done, I'm not enough. People are going to look at me and judge me if I don't get this done. So they put their own needs, their own Maslow needs away, just so they can accomplish this one thing, so that way they can secure what they believe people think of them.
It's funny again, dude. You said weight loss. When I was going through that phase where I almost ended up killing myself, my buddy Roger, I didn't see him for like 3 weeks maybe, and he came down to see how I'm doing, and he looks at me, he's like, dude, it looks like you just got out of jail. Are you not eating anything? And no, I wasn't eating. They didn't have enough appetite. I think the first thing he did was take me to go eat something. I'm like, I'm not hungry, dude. But yeah, I remember those days.
Okay. Yeah, and so with that, there's this kind of proverb that I've heard from a monk where he said, when it comes to self-image, if you're looking at that, the proverb goes, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am, right? It's about that self-image and looking for validation in other people, looking for them to validate how you feel, how you look, and that ultimately, in your mind, breeds success. But success has to be bred within yourself and what you believe that to be.
How many more items do you have? How many more items do you have on that list, buddy? Every time you talk about something, you go and cross it off.
Yeah, they're crossing off and adding on other things. But those are kind of the signs of depression. That's not all of them, but those are the common ones that we usually see.
Episode number 2, we'll talk about everything else.
Now, the question will get asked, okay, I meet this criteria. I am depressed. How do I manage it? So some of the things that you can do to manage depression, um, you'll hear it very commonly, exercise, physical exercise. What that does is a body in motion tends to stay in motion, right? I'm sure everyone has heard that phrase. And it really does help. You'll see that in a lot of mental health facilities, they have some type of exercise program because it does help physiologically. It helps your brain work things out. For people that are spirituality, and self-awareness, those are things that can help. Um, One thing that I tell everyone, and I do it with my soldiers every morning, I tell them, give me something positive. So come up with three things every day, every morning, before you do anything else, before you get on your phone, before you go on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, whatever other social media people have,
Pokemon Go.
before you do anything. What's that?
Pokemon Go.
Pokemon Go, yeah, whatever. Um, before you go on to any of that stuff, you come up with three positive things or three things that you're thankful of for that day. And what that does, it actually starts to change the narrative for yourself. If you find that you're depressed, you're down on yourself, and you have all these negative thoughts, what a lot of times people don't realize is these negative thoughts don't always start with your own voice. When you're thinking about these things, you may hear your parents or your coworkers or random people that you came into say you're not good enough, you're not worth shit, you're this, you're that, and that starts to play in your head over and over and over again, and eventually you'll start to hear it as yourself. You'll start to hear your own self telling you these things because that's what your brain, that's what you're conditioning your brain to do. When you condition your brain to start thinking about the positives, it is now going to start focusing on what is good. What am I thankful for? What is going right? Or what can I do to make things start going right? By doing this every day, you're starting to train your brain to look for the positive things. The brain is just like any other muscle. It will do what you train it to do. So if you're training it to look for these positives in life, it's going to do that. Um, Other things you can do to manage your depression or your funk or whatever you want to call it, avoid alcohol, drugs, substances. All of these things just suppress the feelings. Alcohol is what's known as a depressant. The same thing with certain drugs. They depress certain nervous systems that actually help with managing your depression. Which is why you'll see a lot of people who say, "I'm not depressed. I'm not sad. I'm not this. I'm not that." They get a couple beers in them, a couple of drinks in them, and now they're bawling their eyes out, talking about everything that happened to them in their life, right? Because they haven't learned how to, one, face those issues and know that they are issues, but two, come up with the constructive ways of how to talk about them and how to deal with them. Um, Other things is getting a handle on your own stress, because these are things that will make it more difficult to manage your depression. If you know what stresses you out and you know your triggers, then you know how to stay away from certain situations and you know how to deal with certain situations better. Otherwise, they're just going to fester in your mind over and over and over again. And then always free yourself from familiar traps. If you know that you're trying to stay away from alcohol, don't go into a store that has alcohol. If you know that your family is only going to talk negatively when you're around them, maybe don't go around your family. Find these things that are triggers for certain behaviors, certain habits, certain trains of thoughts, and stay away from those until you're mentally ready to go back into that situation. Um, There's
Crossing
there's
them off.
100 of other things that you can do, but those are some things that you can start off with. Um, Without getting too much into the cliche side of psychology and where all these things root from, which of course is childhood. Um, I always recommend individuals, and I'm going to recommend it to you, Andy. Um, Go on Amazon and look up "Outgrowing the Pain" by Dr. Alina Jill. It's a book about adults. It's literally titled "The Book for and About Adults Abuse as Children," and it talks about what is classified as abuse. It's not always physical abuse, sexual abuse. There are other things that are categorized as abuse that people don't think about until later on in life when it starts affecting them. Um, and we grow into these adults, and we all have similar characteristics when it comes to dealing with these issues. Um, and sometimes we go into certain career fields. You'll hear that people that work in mental health are the craziest. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that before. And to a sense, it's not necessarily true, but there are some things that can be categorized as that. One of the career fields in the book that it talks about is adults with these previous experiences tend to go into what's called the caregiver or healer phase in their life, where they go into career fields that help people. And if they haven't still dealt with their issues, they sometimes start regretting their decision, and they start resenting the people that they're helping because of the fact that they realize they're giving so much of themselves into this job essentially, and they're not getting anything from it. So it's a book. It's a very short book. It
Yeah,
should
because
only take you.
I can't even finish the ones that I started earlier with the kids, so it better be a short
It's got
book.
it's got pictures in it, so
Yes!
you'll be.
Fuck yeah. Hell yeah, I'm down to read those.
Yeah. But that's one of the things is about depression and suicide is education. Educate yourself on all of these things because it's going to help you clearly identify with certain triggers, with certain feelings, habits of behavior, and prevent these thoughts of suicide and ultimately any actions that come out of that. Now, let's talk about the person that's not depressed, that's not suicidal, and has never been, but has a family member that has or does, has a friend that has or does, and wants to help. There's nothing wrong with that. But understand that sometimes with those individuals, they may not be ready to accept help. But what in most cases they are ready to accept is someone to listen. So I tell everyone, if you want to help someone, make sure that you listen to understand and do not listen to respond. Listen to understand, to attempt to understand the situation that they're in. Sometimes you're not going to be able to understand it. But don't listen to respond. Don't listen to give them your feedback because you heard this guy on a podcast one time say these are some things that you can say to someone, right? Try to understand their situation and understand where they're coming from, and don't blame them. Don't say, oh, well, this person has it worse than you, or there's people over here that don't have this or that, because it's up to their own thought and their own experiences of how catastrophic that situation is. Um, And then touching back on something that you said earlier is you didn't have it as bad. But with doing that and people that are depressed, a lot of times that's why they don't talk. They don't speak out because they feel, I don't have it as bad as this person. I don't have it as bad as that person, or it could have been worse. The fact is that whatever the situation is, it still happened. and in many situations, it obviously still is affecting someone's life. So using excuses as to not deal with it um, can work for a certain amount of time, but eventually that balloon analogy is going to come to effect. And all of these things are going to start going into there, and something's going to happen. That air's got to go somewhere. Um, but being that friend, listening to understand the situation. And if you feel that someone is at their wits' end and they're contemplating that suicide attempt, one thing that you can do is just confront them head on. Don't be aggressive, but you can say, individuals that have been in your situation before, that have been in your shoes and understand your situation, have thought about suicide and have thought about death. Are you having those thoughts? Do you feel like that is a plan for you? And if they give you their honest response, there are some things you can do to help them. One, you can always call 911 and get a dispatcher to bring EMS and bring someone that can take them to the hospital to be evaluated, and then they'll determine if that person needs to go to a psych facility or not, or if there's certain protective factors, if they've got a good family support, if they got friends support, if they are religious and they believe in their religion and they're very close to that. These are some things that can help prevent someone from having suicidal ideations and suicide attempts. But there's there's a bunch of things that you can do as that friend, but ultimately just being there for them, and don't take things personally, right? Because that balloon effect, they may explode. They may give you 100 different things, and sometimes they may tell you things that aren't necessarily true, but they are so down in their self-worth that they don't believe that they deserve your help. They don't believe that they deserve to have a friend that actually wants to help them. So they'll say things and do things to push you away, and all that does is it further validates themselves. It further validates, this is why I am the way I am, or this is why things are the way they are, is because I do X, Y, and Z. And they do these things at their lowest point because in many cases, people that are depressed or are having thoughts of suicide, they don't want to hurt anybody else. They just want to hurt themselves. So by pushing everyone away and by isolating themselves, they now have this interpretation of, it's all about me. There's no one else around me. So if I go through with this, I'm the only person that I'm hurting. I'm not hurting anybody else. So when someone has those thoughts and they do try to push you away, allow them some space, but don't take it personal, because at the end of the day, they do still need you. Deep down inside, they do still want you a part of their life. But they're just trying to create that excuse of pushing you away so they won't hurt you in the end.
That makes sense. Buddy. I've learned more about myself in the last hour and 20 minutes. You've hit some points that got me thinking. You remind me about, like, don't bring work home, and I think a lot of the stress lately has been some work and then obviously family members, but I mean, my outlet is this, and I've used this to let stuff out, and I do feel better after talking, even if it's like the last episode was just me in front of this microphone staring at the phone thinking that I'm talking to somebody, because look at how we're doing it. So it's just pretending I'm talking to somebody. But when I first started doing this by myself, I couldn't get 2 words out, man. And now it's like practice and practice and practice. It's like I can pull off a 45-minute conversation by myself, So, buddy, I mean, you're like a little brother to me, man. You are a little brother. Fuck it. You are. watch you grow into the respectful man that you are now. And I want to thank you for coming on here and, for doing this. And I know there's a lot of people that listen to my podcast that have been depressed in the past, and probably still are, and maybe they'll learn from this. And I don't know what to say, man. Just thank you for coming on the podcast, man.
Yeah, no problem.
And I know I'm gonna say it for millions of people. Thank you for your service, man. And anyone that listens to the podcast who happens to be in the military, ex-military, veteran. I know I have a few. I know Paul's one of them. Buddy, I love you. Thank you for your service. 9/11, hashtag 20 years, hashtag never forget. And Chris, like I end every podcast, buddy, thank you for riding with me.
Thank you for having me on this show. And for active duty veterans, people that have served in the military before, we're all brothers and sisters, and it's all about helping each other. So if there are any active duty veterans that just want to reach out to someone, please feel free to reach out to Andy, and he'll give you my personal phone number.
People just usually end it with "thank you for having me," but all right, buddy. Thank you for being here, man.
All right.
Thank you for listening to Ride With Me, the Flat Tire Indie Podcast. You can also listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, and Podbean.